Admittedly, the title of this video is a little bit clickbaity. I was not dumped because I was transgender. I think any breakup is very complex, and mine was no exception. It's hard to attribute it to any one factor, but I think it is certainly the case that my transition introduced a lot of tension in my relationship, and that this tension was a significant factor in the reason that my 2.5-year relationship ended around 9 months ago. I titled the video this because, in addition to the fact that you can't fit any nuanced description into a YouTube title, I wanted to reach people who are feeling what I was feeling around 2 years ago, which is you are realizing that you're transgender or gender nonconforming, you're realizing there's a lot of ways you want to change up your gender presentation, maybe you go on a medically transition, maybe you've already started, and you're in a pretty serious relationship. You love this person, you care about them, and you feel like if this person were to leave me because of these choices I'm making, I just wouldn't make them. I would rather be with this person and not be totally happy in my gender presentation than, be alone, be single. That was how I felt for a really long time. And my ex reassured me all the time that he wasn't going to leave me because I was going to transition. He said everything. But I was worried, and I was convinced that there were going to be problems we couldn't foresee that would crop up. There were going to be reasons I was worried I would be less attractive. I was worried that he wouldn't be attracted to me, all of that. And at the end of the day, my fears sort of came true. My relationship did end, and it ended largely in part because of my transition. But I'm sitting here, and I'm happy. I'm happier than I've ever been, and I'm, in particular, happy that I'm single. The fact I'm single isn't just some sort of, consolation part, where it's oh, I wish I was still in my relationship, but at least I'm happy with my body, at least I feel comfortable with myself. No, I'm actively happy I'm single. I'm actively happy that relationship ended. And it wasn't a bad relationship, it wasn't an abusive relationship. He was a wonderful person, I wish him all the best. But I'm happy it's over. I'm happy that I got to go through my transition alone, figure out who I am alone. Everything was actively better. And I can't even begin to describe how unfathomable this would have been to me 2 years ago. And so here I am. I can't speak to my past self, and I can't comfort him as he was crying in the shower, journaling late at night, talking to everyone about how afraid he was. I can't go back to that person and tell him that it worked out, but I can talk to you and tell you that it will work out. So, to give you the full explanation here, I'm going to go into why I was so afraid, why I have spent so much of my life feeling lonely, feeling in particularly romantically lonely, and how much I cared about being attractive, and how all these things came into play into my choice to transition or not transition at different times in my life. So I'm going to go through my whole history, talk about a bunch of personal things, and then I'm going to tell you how it worked out, and how it worked out better than I could have possibly imagined. So if you follow my channel, you know that I'm a PhD student, I'm a proper adult, and I transitioned as an adult. But it wasn't the first time I thought about transition. When I was in high school, I seriously considered transition. When I decided this time around, the feelings felt more intense, they felt like, no, I actually should do it, I actually really need to do it. But I had to reconcile, why didn't I do it the first time around? What is different now? And so, in trying to think about that, I went back and looked at, the limited examples of times where I wrote down my feelings around transition, because often I was too afraid to make any explicit reference to this, because I thought then I was sort of locking myself into that fate, right? If I said I thought maybe I'm a boy, if I wrote that on paper, then, it was as good as true. So I found this post that I remembered making on some anonymous forum late one night when I was 16, and it was so striking to me, so I'm going to read you a little bit of it. So, in this post, I am basically asking these random internet strangers to tell me my gender, which, if you're watching this video, no one on the internet can just tell you your gender. But I was 16 when I made this post, so I didn't know any better. So I talk a lot about what types of gender presentation, make me feel what sort of way, and then I get to the meat of this post, which unfortunately for me is a theme that comes up time and time again in the course of my gender history, where I say, the reality is, in terms of gender, all I really want is to be seen as attractive. I think that was what hid the fact that I might not be a girl in the normal sense for me for so long. I always dressed like a girl because that was what I felt I looked most attractive as. I would take offense when people would mistake me as a guy because that meant my outfit wasn't working, not that I didn't want to be seen as male. My body is reasonably androgynous, and I just can't stop thinking about how I looked if I dressed as Lincoln. So, Lincoln is the name my parents would have given me if I was AMAB, and at that point in my life I thought I would go by Lincoln. Happy I chose Arthur. Anywho. What would I do if I really did look hotter as a guy? I don't know. I have no desire to dress in between genders, simply because that's not viewed as conventionally attractive. I know that sounds petty, and it is. Anyways, I was wondering if there's a label for this. So, is there a label for just wanting to look hot? That's the gender identity I've presented? No, of course not. The whole thing is so telling. I'm having a really hard time in this post determining, who I am, what I feel comfortable as, because as I've said, I want to just do what other people want. Like, that's like the entire thing. I'm just so caught up in wanting to be attractive, I can't even determine what I would feel happy as, what I want. And that's very understandable to me, because that time in my life, I hadn't dated anyone seriously in high school. I didn't date anyone in high school. I didn't really have people have crushes on me. I had so many random crushes. I was like, you know, I'm bisexual, more or less. And I was really boy-girl crazy all of high school, but like to no end. I mean, no one was interested in me. And so I was just so lonely. And not only was I lonely romantically, but I was quite lonely friendship-wise. And, you know, I have a lot of thoughts about that now, which I won't get into, but I think that there's something hard about, like, when you are not confident in yourself and you're not happy with your social situation in general, I think it's tempting to pivot a lot of that onto specifically the feelings of desirability, the feelings of wanting to be attractive. Would I have felt so intensely that my gender is wanting to be hot if I had a great friend group, if I was confident and happy in life? I don't think so. I think I would have certainly still wanted to date people, but I just don't think I would have felt that strongly about this. So the end result of this period in high school was I even referred to it as a detransition, which is kind of crazy because I hadn't transitioned in the first place, but I really, really radically changed my appearance. I grew my hair out, I dyed it blonde, I learned how to do makeup, I like feminized myself so radically because I just wanted to be hot, and I knew that, you know, for an AFAB person, often the best, you know, the easiest way to be hot is to look conventionally feminine. I still think that's the case. It worked. I started dating someone almost immediately when I went to college, and it almost entirely because of how I looked. He was straight, super, super, super conventional, like so conforming, and it was both the fact that I was living as a woman, but also that I was living as a conventionally feminine woman that attracted him to me. So then that relationship obviously didn't work. It failed not because of my gender, because of other things, but certainly underneath it, there was this tension because I had pinned my whole gender identity as a woman at that point onto him. Like, I was really only a woman in his eyes. He made me feel feminine. He made me feel like I was actually pulling it off. Like, I was actually making it work to be a woman, because my only sense of gender at that point was in terms of, you know, the way people were attracted to me. And so because he viewed me as attractive, because he viewed me as a woman, that made me one. At that point in my life, that was how I felt. So recently I had been digging around, and I found this piece of writing that I wrote from the summer before we broke up, where I could tell our relationship was gonna end, and I was really scared. So in this piece of writing, I talk about the ways in which I viewed how his gaze on me changed my body, how I was worried that those things would revert back or go away after we broke up. I say, as I hunched under the streams of water, it was like my spine was jutting out my back. That was one of those moments where I felt so thin I might break. I'm not even that thin. I used to be. Now I have curves that even wearing jeans and my Patagonia for a week in a row can't hide. When I'm with you, I feel like I am more. Before you, I had small breasts. And now I have tits. I have a stomach, a pouch that you like to squeeze absent-mindedly, and I have thighs that you tickle through the tears of my jeans. I wonder if when things end, this weight will melt off me, and I will be that lanky cross-country runner with braces and a pixie cut again. So, what I'm expressing here is, like, that, you know, I never called my chest. I didn't use those language to refer to it ever. And he very much, like, made me refer to it that way. He, like, would request I wear certain clothing items. He, you know, yeah, would comment on my body in a way that I just never related to. But at the time, I viewed that as, like, so crucial to the ways that I had been accepted by society that I was, like, really terrified that when it ended, I would go back to viewing my chest the way I've always viewed it. And I did. When I broke up, the first thing I did when my ex and I broke up, so this was in the middle of college, was I ordered boxers. The first thing I did was order boxers. And it wasn't even about gender at that point, but it was so, like, once his gaze on me, like, lifted even slightly, once I had just the freedom to be even slightly who I felt I was underneath, it was like, boom, you know, like, I stopped wearing push-up bras. I started wearing sports bras and boxers, and, you know, it just immediately changed. Then, you know, later on, I dated the most recent ex, the one with whom my transition ended my relationship. I am, like, so grateful that I was in this relationship with with my ex, the current one, not the super straight one. My most recent ex is like a lovely person, so he is pansexual, and I knew that when I started dating him, and I am confident that was one of the reasons I was attracted to him. We met on Tinder, and I know that I swiped on him because he listed this in his bio. So this is all very egg, meaning like a trans person who doesn't know their trans behavior of me, because at the time I was really feminine, but I knew that there was something brewing under the surface. And he knew it almost immediately. I mean, he said that the first night that we met, I already was making comments like that were very telling to him, and within weeks he would call me his big strong man because he just observed immediately how much I liked that. And he gave me the permission to express masculinity in a way that I had just never felt capable in my life. I think that he certainly, oddly enough, despite the fact that my transition ended our relationship, I think he accelerated and gave me the confidence to transition. I know I would have at some point, but I don't think I would have so early if I hadn't dated him. And again, he's just a wonderful person. I'm so grateful for that time in my life. But as feelings started to accelerate, I gained more confidence in life. I felt attractive as a guy under his eyes for the first time. I started to get scared because there were tensions that were cropping up. Even though he called me his big strong man, the reality of me being his big strong man was like a whole nother thing. So the fears really cropped up when I cut my hair. So at that point, certainly had begun the year before, but in an increasing and more intense sense, I was uncomfortable with my body. And understandably, as my partner, he didn't like that I was uncomfortable with my body because I was uncomfortable with him interacting with my body. And there were a lot of, like, say, sexual behaviors that I was no longer comfortable with that were like a strong no-go for me. And that was something that, despite being supportive in many senses, he was really not happy with. And I'm sympathetic to that, right? Like, I get it. Of course you want to be able to touch your partner. Like, that's an important part of showing love, and it was especially for him. But that was not a good pressure for me to feel. And it was not good for him, but it was really not good for me. I felt like immensely guilty. I felt broken. And I also just knew that I don't know that I'll ever want to engage sexually with my body in that way again. I don't think that, like, I have no judgment for trans men who, or generally trans people who want to use their body however they want to use it, but for me particularly, part of my transition, part of my gender identity has been a change in the way that I view myself sexually and what I want to do sexually. And so, first of all, so we introduced this incompatibility here, which was hard in of itself, but then also my ex had a lot of feelings. Like, understandably, we went from being seen as a straight couple to being seen as a gay couple almost immediately. Like, I passed partially when I had my hair cut. And so one of the first times that I knew I was passing was that people were laughing and pointing at us in the mall in my home state because there were not many gay people in my home state, and so people were just, like, shocked. That weighed on me, that weighed on him a lot, right, to be seen as a gay couple. And, he'd known that he was queer, but he'd also gotten a lot of, like, mistreatment throughout his life for being queer, and so understandably, this, stirred up a lot of feelings in him. And very, like, immediately, a lot of these tensions pushed towards him wanting to be in an open relationship, which is something that I am, in principle, totally cool with. I would be happy to be in an open relationship again. But at that point in my life, feeling so uncomfortable in my body, I was like, like, pre-T, mostly closeted me was not about to go on Grindr or whatever. Like, that was just not gonna happen for me. And so these requests felt kind of, like, sad to me because he wanted to be, out there living his best life, and I just couldn't. And in particular, it felt like I knew I wasn't giving him what he wanted, and that was a significant part of the reason why he wanted this. In addition to the fact that, both of us in principle were cool with being in an open relationship. But at the end of the day, I was like, okay, you know what, like, starting winter break, we can be open when we're in a different city. Like, that seems fine by me. Then, before winter break, he downloaded Tinder again in planning to set up dates for on winter break. So this is sort of like gray zone, not really great behavior, but the nail in the coffin was that he was on women, like, only seeking women Tinder. And when I caught him in all this, he told me about this, that he was on the only women seeking Tinder, and about how that was because he wanted the validation that only really women could give him. And that was like, oh my god, that was the most devastating thing to hear, because I had kind of known that and thought that he liked going on dates with me back in the day because I was so feminine, and that now I was this guy that made him seem gay, and that he really still craved the approval of feminine women, that place that I had once served myself for him and that I could no longer be. It was so crushing that I couldn't even feel angry. I just felt I felt pathetic, I felt sad, and the first thing I did was just lock myself in the bathroom and like break down and feel like I had been making the most ridiculous choice ever, that I had fooled myself into thinking I would feel loved and that I, was gonna be alone and sad forever. It's crazy because this was just 2 years ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago. And I hear this kind of story all the time in trans spaces, of someone embarking upon a part of their transition that's new, that's exciting, and of their partner not taking it well. And again, in ways that may or may not be the fault of that partner, but nevertheless, things aren't working. And I hear that same kind of sentiment coming out of other trans people all the time, which is like oh God, how do I keep this going? How do I preserve this relationship? Like, how do I make my partner feel comfortable? And I think it's an unfortunate thing that like almost all of us who are going through a transition and are dating someone have to deal with, because there's like a big change that's happening. And so after that fight, what have you, I don't even know if you could call it a fight because I was so sad. Things got better, sort of, but our relationship was just not great that whole year leading up to when we broke up. There were all sorts of problems one way or another from my transition. So the summer before I started testosterone, I froze my eggs, which is something I've talked about in another video. And my ex was so amazingly helpful throughout that process. Like, I don't know that I could have done it without him, but it was just too much pressure to have put on that relationship. It really ate him alive, the reality of doing the egg freezing. And then I think that there was like an interesting double whammy then of when I started testosterone, I went off to start my PhD, and when we would call, it was just like I sounded like a different person every time. And so we'd had this distance that was already placed between us from the stress of doing the egg freezing as a couple. And then my medical transition quite literally made me a different person than when we started dating. And I remember at some point looking at old photos of the two of us when we first started dating, and I just looked like a whole new person. He looked entirely different, and it was just like that relationship was done. Whether or not we broke up, that time in my life was over. Either our relationship had to radically change, as it already did, or it had to end, but there was no way we were going back to what we were like in 2017, 2018. There was no way we were going back to that. We just both had moved forward. We'd grown up. We were different people. So it ended, and it ended again with a lot of the same bitterness over my egg freezing, over what I was comfortable doing or wasn't comfortable doing sexually. And of course, again, I don't want to make it sound like I really, really am grateful for him, and there were a lot of ways in which I was not the best partner to him. So I don't mean to this is not trying to mean like a drama channel or anything. I do not want, I ideally hope that no one who knows either of us will ever watch this video, so it's mostly just me using this as a space to talk to you guys. But anyways, I was not the ideal partner. There were plenty of very valid complaints he had about my behavior as a boyfriend, but nevertheless, my transition was a huge, huge tension and a huge reason it ended. So I think I was afraid when it ended that I would have that same experience that I'd had when my relationship with my ex ended, where all these things I felt this time so personally happy with regards to my transition. I loved my voice, I loved my hair, I loved my clothing, I loved all of it. I was worried that I wouldn't be strong enough to keep it up while single. And that same sentiment that I had previously, where I was my chest was no longer tits, it was a chest again, that my curves were no longer curves, they were things I hid. All those sentiment I had with my old ex, I felt like the same thing would happen again, but this time in a way that I really would have been uncomfortable with. But it didn't, because when I was single, I was just me, and I had the freedom to be me. And previously, I was kind of living a lie in some sense. I'm not a feminine person, and when I didn't have the pressure of that relationship, I stopped being feminine. But I am a masculine person. I'm happy being trans. I'm happy being a guy. And when my relationship ended, I felt all those things but more strongly, because I was alone, and I was alone in my own body, and I wanted to be who I am. If anything, my confidence in my gender identity increased after I broke up, and I felt even more grateful that I had started my transition when I was single. So the best part of my transition has not been any one given physical change, but rather the sense of alignment with who I feel I am inside, with what I'm showing to the world. I have gone through this period of self-actualization that has been more profound than anything I've gone through in my life previously. I find myself thinking about who I was, who I am now, what I want to be in the future, my goals, my dreams, with more intensity than I could have imagined previously, and with a clarity that I never thought I would reach. And I just couldn't have experienced that if I was still in a relationship. I needed to be single to find out who I am. when I was in a relationship, I spent so much time with my ex that I felt like his boyfriend first. Like, my number one identity. I remember thinking this is like, I don't want to be a girlfriend, I want to be a boyfriend. Well, now I'm happy to be Arthur, you know? I'm not anyone's partner. I am defined by who I am. And my ex had all sorts of views about what kind of a man he wanted me to be. This came from a really wonderful place where he wanted to support me, and he knew me really, really well. So he thought that I would make the most amazing, effeminate, flamboyant gay man, and he would, you know, encourage me to dress in, like, form-fitting, you know, clothing and wear, like, patterns, and to be, like, you know, love my body and dance and own it and all that. Wanted me to sing and wanted, you know, again, like, really, like, it really was coming from the best of places. But the reality of it is, like, I'm not those things. Like, I'm a frumpy guy who dresses like a teenager. I love cargo shorts. I love graphic tees. I mean, you know, I like my, like, chains, and I like living in a total pit of a room where I am terrible about keeping my floor clean. I like playing, you know, my random card games online. And I'm just not that hip, I'm not that fashionable, I'm just me. Really owning these things has been, like, important, like owning my love of cargo shorts. I mean, it sounds like I'm joking, but it's been serious. I am now all the things I always wanted to be. And I think I also, when I was dating him, I viewed myself often in comparison to him, and I viewed my maleness in comparison to him. And not just also about gender things, but, like, next to him, you know, he is so outgoing, he's so extroverted, he is such a, like, wonderfully artistic and a funny person. And so next to him, I was, like, the quiet, like, awkward, nerdy, dreary boyfriend. And the reality of it is that in my social circles I run in, I'm so extroverted and I'm so dynamic. I'm not like a shy, quiet, weird person. And I think I needed to be alone and to be separate from him to develop my own sense of identity, not as relative to him, but just on my own. And similarly, all of my physical changes, it feels like they're mine. They're not just my body that I'm sharing with him, it's like truly mine. And I remember, like, when I was doing my first testosterone shot, I was still dating him, and I remember making the active choice that I wouldn't let him do my testosterone shot for me, because I wanted to feel that it was me, that I had set myself on this journey, and that every one of those changes was one that I owned. I wanted my voice to be something that I used for speaking for me, not that I used just to talk to him. And I wanted, like, because for so long, the whole crux of this problem had been that I had viewed my body as something for someone else. I had viewed my gender as something to be attractive to other people. And to break free of that, I just needed to be single. You know, his affirmation that I was attractive, that I looked good as a man, that that my voice sounded great as it was deepening from testosterone, all of that was in some sense part of the problem, and I needed to just, like, escape that mindset. And for me, it was just necessary that I be single. And then the other thing is, like, I can't describe how absolutely wonderful it is to, like, for the first time in my life, not care about dating, not be, like, desperately scrambling for romance. I feel so fulfilled and satisfied with every aspect of my life that I just don't care. Like, I don't need to be hot. I don't care if you think I am, but it's not, it's like bottom of, there was a time in my life where I would have given everything. I would have given, like, half my brain to be attractive. And now I just, like, it's just not important. I have a social network that I feel so happy in. It doesn't matter. I could be horribly overweight, totally bald, like, you know, with, like, no teeth, whatever, and they would still love me. And my appearance is just entirely irrelevant to all of the best things that are in my life right now. I love my job. I love where I live. I love eating burritos. I love putting on clothing at the start of the day. I love looking at my body. Like, I love my hair. I love, like, late nights drinking with friends and talking about the meaning of life. I love all of it. And none of it has anything to do with how I look. And reaching that point, like, I needed to be single. I just needed to be single to get there. And I always thought, I mean, I remember in middle school journaling, I was like, my life is really good right now, and the only thing that could make it perfect is if I had a boyfriend. Like, that's the one thing. And for so long I felt that, and now I just don't. My life is perfect as it is. Things are great. And don't get me wrong, I am still boy crazy. I am so boy crazy. I mean, I I have like non-stop crushes on, now I'm realizing, straight men. Time after time again, man, it's a whole separate story, but I'll be like, he's amazing, blah blah blah, and you know, like he seems pretty queer to me, and then you hear about the girlfriend. Anyways, so it's not like I'm out here celibate, but it just doesn't carry the same weight as it used to. These crushes are just that, they're crushes. They're not like a sense of like my self-worth, they're not a sense of like, you know, of my happiness. They're just fun entertainment, much like TV shows are. And reaching that point and realizing how I feel good enough on my own, I feel that I am enough and I don't need another person to make me happy, has just been so incredibly rewarding and so incredibly amazing. And I, like, sometimes I just wake up and, like, I wake up in this fear of, like, oh my god, like, I can't believe how close it was to, like, me not having broken up with my ex, and to that relationship having been stuck through, and I wouldn't have had all these things happen, these amazing moments of clarity about myself and happiness with myself. I wouldn't have had, like, it's been so amazing having no one to report to about where I am. I don't need to tell anyone why I'm staying out late. I don't need to apologize for not being there to call at night to say goodnight. I don't need to, like, tell anyone when I'm gonna wake up or where I'm gonna be on any given weekend. And with that freedom, I have met so many people and made so many, like, amazing friendships, amazing relationships, and I made them as myself, as Arthur. I have been, like, meeting people as a guy, and it's just, like, incredible. It's so incredible to walk to a party and know that people are going to see you as you have always felt, and that I wouldn't give that for the world. And then there's the other fact that, like, in your life, you're going to go through hard things. I remember I was talking with my parents about the fact that I was worried my relationship might end because of how traumatic the egg freezing process was on my ex and how hard it was for him to go through that. And I felt so guilty. I was like, oh my god, I really think had I not frozen my eggs, I would still be with him. And my dad was like, I know a couple that, you know, one of them went through cancer when they were in college, and they're married now. And I was like, well, what's the point? He's like, I mean, if you're meant to be together, you should be able to go through hard things together. And that, you know, that was just so surprising for me to hear from him, because I know he loved my ex, and I really thought I thought they were going to be upset when I told them that we were breaking up. But instead, I think we just realized that, like, we'd been together for 2.5 years, but we hadn't been through this significant of, like, a life change before. And that in the course of a marriage, in the course of a lifetime with a person, you're going to go through hard shit. And, you know, some relationships are just sort of like, you know, what is the word? Good weather relationships? I'm not sure. But anyways, you know, you can handle things when times are great, but you just can't handle hard things. And so I you know, I'm like, yeah, if I hadn't transitioned, we would still be together. But at some point, you know, maybe we would have even gotten married, and maybe we would have had kids, and then one of those kids gets really sick, and then, you know, we couldn't make it through that. Or, you know, one of us gets a serious injury and we can't make it through that. Or we go through financial trouble and we can't make it through that. Like, transition is a hard thing, but there's so many hard things in life. And it's, of course, really hard when that hard thing is something that society really stigmatizes and is something that it's such a personal decision, but it's one of many things that comes up. And so, you know, if you're, obviously you should put in the work with your partner and, you know, try to make things work, but if it doesn't, it probably would have ended some other reason too. So this has been a bit of a rambly video, but I just wanted to offer a different perspective on, you know, these issues that come up of transitioning while in a relationship, which is that, like, even if your relationship does end, that might be an amazing thing. And I know it seems so hard to imagine, and I literally couldn't have imagined it at that time in my life either. But you might find that you're enough, and that living with yourself is enough, is better than enough, and that without having another person around, you're able to discover who you are, what you want in life, and have amazing experiences that are, like, the first year I found in transition is just, it's been so, like, so much of a spiritual journey in a way I couldn't have possibly expected, and that experiencing these things on your own, as your own person, you might find it's amazing, and you might find happiness where you would have never expected it. So I wish you the best, and I, like, totally get what a stressful and a hard thing it is to go through. But when you get to the end of the other side, you might be like me in my shoes, where I am just so incredibly grateful that relationship ended. And it was amazing while it lasted, but oh my god, I'm so happy to be single. I'm so happy I transitioned. I can't even describe how good life is these days.